Welcome to New Heritage Wool. Happy to have you back. If you have been following along with this coat project, you'll know it has been a long process, but I am enjoying every moment of it and I hope you are too. So in today's video, I'm going to cover the making of the epaulettes, the sleeve tabs, and the belt that will go with this jacket. I had to improvise for this video because I was intending to show the sleeves and other things, but I had supplies get lost in the mail because of the snowstorm we had here in Pennsylvania. So big improv, here we go. With that said, let's just jump right into the video and I hope you enjoy. Make sure to comment below. Let me know if you have any questions with techniques that I use or just things that you think are cool. Leave them down in the comments below. Also, if you have any of your own tips and tricks that you would like to share, I would love to hear about them. So without waiting any further, let's get started. I decided that I wanted to show the mock-up process for the smaller items, but in this video I'm going a little deeper into problem solving, how I need to add structure to this piece, figure out which stitches I want to use. Do I want to pin everything? Do I want to baste everything and then hand stitch? So it's really just a process of problem solving for myself. So if you've never done anything like this before, I highly suggest trying it, even if it's just a half-made sample, but making those mock-ups will really improve the end product that you're looking for. Layering my materials will be key here to add the structure that I need, which is basically the motto for this coat. Layering materials and making sure that it's not creating too much bulk but providing the structure that I need. Also, it can just be the motto for tailoring in general, that structure is always key and manipulating the fabric to get the results you want. That's the game of tailoring, and that's exactly why I love it so much, because no tailoring project is the same. And if there's anything in life that I absolutely hate, is doing the same thing over and over and over and over. Unless it's basting stitches or fell stitches or any other kind of tailoring stitch. Those I will gladly do over and over and over again. Once I figured out the layering process that I wanted to use for this mock-up, I then found the plaid fabric that will be backed with fusible interfacing, and then the layer of hair canvas, possibly another layer of hair canvas for the epaulettes and the sleeve tabs, but I'm going to wait until the end to really decide that. Second, for the backing of each of these, I am going to do self fabric, but it won't be backed in interfacing because of bulk reasons. I did try the double interfacing on the front and the back, and it's just too thick around the seam allowances. And keep in mind, layering my materials will be key here to add the structure that I need, which is basically the motto for this coat. Layering materials and making sure that it's not creating too much bulk but providing the structure that I need. Also, it can just be the motto for tailoring in general, that structure is always key and manipulating the fabric to get the results you want. That's the game of tailoring, and that's exactly why I love it so much, because no tailoring project is the same. And if there's anything in life that I absolutely hate, is doing the same thing over and over and over and over. Unless it's basting stitches or fell stitches or any other kind of tailoring stitch. Those I will gladly do over and over and over again. Once I figured out the layering process that I wanted to use for this mock-up, I then found the plaid fabric that will be backed with fusible interfacing, and then the layer of hair canvas, possibly another layer of hair canvas for the epaulettes and the sleeve tabs, but I'm going to wait until the end to really decide that. Second, for the backing of each of these, I am going to do self fabric, but it won't be backed in interfacing because of bulk reasons. I did try the double interfacing on the front and the back, and it's just too thick around the seam allowances. And keep in mind, I am not machine stitching these. I am hand stitching all the way around. All the inside stuff is going to be tons of basting, tons of hand stitching. And the reason why I do this is because it just looks so much better. I am more in tune with my garment that way instead of using the machine. So if you haven't ever tried creating these design details by hand instead of through the machine and then trimming and pressing and using your corner turn thing, I highly suggest using the Couture method. Now I want to talk a little more about the Couture method and making the epaulettes and everything, because this is a method, like I said before, I'd rather do this than use a machine. And a lot of it is for accuracy, but also because it adds way more structure than if you were to just interface this with fusible, sew around the edges by machine, trim those edges down to 1/8 of an inch, flip it, turn it, and press it. The reason why is because when you do that by machine and you have that method, your edges are most likely guaranteed to not be perfectly straight, not be perfectly turned. And your points are going to kind of wing out if you are not really, really good at stitching the perfect line and decreasing your stitches when you get to those points, so on and so forth. So with the Couture method, it's so much easier for me and it just makes more sense. So with that, I have my fabric. I then lay down my hair canvas, baste stitch that down the center so it does not move, it's secure. And then once I have that, I started to turn in my seam allowance, which is 1/4 of an inch. I baste that down. I baste that down and miter my corners. So if you've never mitered a corner by hand before, definitely look it up, because it is very satisfying when you've done it correctly and it looks so clean. So you'll probably notice that from my mock-up into the real fabric that I just completely nixed the pattern altogether. Yeah, part of it was because the pattern has the pointed edge, but I figured, you know what, it's more of a nuisance to create a new pattern, even though it's just making it into a rectangle. But I am probably going to be more accurate with just cutting rectangles out on the bias and cutting them out at the final width with seam allowance and going that way. It's going to be faster, it's going to be easier. So I just went straight into drawing rectangles on my fabric and carrying on. This worked out pretty well. No mistakes were made, thankfully, because I really don't want to have to buy more fabric. Once I have my seam allowances turned in and basted down, this allows me to move this item around, and I could toss it across the table and that thing is going nowhere. It is solid. I don't have to worry about something slipping, whereas if I use pins to hold it, I always worry that my pins are going to fall out. Yes, that happens a lot. So I am taking more time to use Couture methods on this whole coat because I don't want things to move. And you can definitely bet your bottom dollar I will be basting my side seams before sewing them by machine. Because when you do basting, things stay in place, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Basting is my best friend, and it just has my back every time I sew, which is so probably really strange for people to hear that, but I definitely recommend trying basting instead of using pins or those little binder clip things that they have now to hold things in place. So yeah, sorry, that was a tangent on why you should use basting stitches, but go try it. Leave your comments below and let me know how you like it, or if you don't like it, totally fine. Enjoy pinning things and stabbing yourself, because I certainly don't, and I will definitely be using basting stitches. So since I decided to just go in and make rectangles on my final fabric, I also decided to do the same thing with the hair canvas. Now the hair canvas I did not put on the bias because I did not want my belt to stretch in any way. So because it's on the bias on the self fabric, it will have a tendency to stretch. Now, if I use the hair canvas and put it on the straight grain, it'll prevent that from happening. When I've stitched everything together, it will not stretch. So for the hair canvas, I blocked out 1.5 inch wide pieces at a really long length and then just laid them in, trimmed them to the length that I needed. And for the belt, I also cut out rectangles that were 2 inches. I think I decreased it just a tiny bit so that way when I folded the seam allowance in, it would then take care of the bulk of that fabric. So it should be just maybe 1/8 inch under the final size, and then once you've said and done everything, then it should turn out to be close to 2 inches, which is totally fine. Once I kind of got midway with my mock-up, I realized I'm not gonna like doing these pointed the pointed ends. I'm not gonna enjoy doing these pointed ends, especially since I'm going to have to do them 5 times. So, and also the accuracy and the consistency that all of the points are going to be identical was a very slim chance in my opinion for just myself. And I just wasn't willing to take the time to sit there and learn how to perfect it. Maybe down the road I will, but I decided to just make the ends straight for time and my sanity. And some people will probably be disappointed that I just kind of skipped a step or just gave up, but that's my decision. It's my coat. You're not wearing it. I am. Okay, so, and then for the belt buckle, this was very new to me. I have always loved covered belt buckles. I love how they just look really classy and very sophisticated. So I've never done this before. It wasn't quite sure how it was done, but surprisingly it ended up being a lot easier than what I thought. The kit that I bought, it had a little paper pattern that was actually backed with adhesive on both sides. So it made the process so much easier. So of course, like everything I do, I make a little miniature mock-up, making sure I understand the process before just diving in. I really hate making mistakes because sometimes that means I have just wasted some money. I have already done that with cutting out the wrong sleeve pattern, which I'll probably talk a little bit about in my next video, but for now, let's talk about this belt buckle. So off camera, I traced out this little pattern on a small piece of muslin, and then I just set the buckle piece down and made sure that I understood how it wrapped around and how everything got encased together. And then once I did that, I just went straight in. I also made sure that my buckle fabric was on the bias so it matched my belt and was very cohesive with everything else. And then after that, it was just easy. I peeled off one layer, pressed it down on the fabric, peeled off the second layer, pressed it down on the fabric, cut it out, and peeled off the second layer, and then placed my buckle on the sticky side. And then after that, it's just meticulously wrapping it around the edges, making sure that, you know, the corners don't get too bulky, which in one section it did, but after pressing it down a lot and kind of moving things around, I got it to smooth out. And then it's placing the back of the buckle in. Now, I do regret one thing. I regret not covering the back of the buckle with black lining. I think I'll probably eventually redo my buckle and add that lining. I can't undo it because I have already glued it in place. That is unfortunate for me, but it's an easy fix down the road. Okay, so for the belt, I did change my mind on whether I wanted eyelets. So for now, I am going to just use this belt as one that just loops through and then you pull it tighter. And the reason being, one, I ordered 1/4 inch eyelets and those are way too big. I don't know what it is. When it comes to like those little design details, buttons, eyelets, anything small, I don't know. I always think 1/4 inch is smaller than what it comes to me and like what it really looks like. So down the road, maybe I'll change the belt to have eyelets and act more like a real belt. But I want to test out this style, this like loop through style of belt before I completely destroy the belt and put holes in it and then regret it. So I did the same process on all of these pieces throughout the video. Now I didn't show I chose not to show every single piece because this would be a very repetitive video. So the same hair canvas, basting, and catch stitching method is used on all epaulettes, sleeve tabs, and my belt. And then for each one, I am going to back it with self fabric. And you'll see on my belt, I did try to use this I think it's like I did try to use this 1.5 inch wide grosgrain ribbon, but I decided later that I'm going to remove it and then put self fabric because there was a couple of things I didn't like about it. One, I didn't like that it was brown. I'd rather it be black. And also it's not cotton, it's a polyester, and I really want to avoid having any synthetics on this coat. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and learned some new techniques to use in your projects at home. If you like what you saw, please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends. If you have used this technique before on making belts or in other projects, let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories and get to chat with you about them. If you haven't checked out my new videos on drafting a sleeve for coats and jackets, please go check it out. Also, there's another video out on drafting a 2-piece sleeve, which is a sleeve that is traditionally used in tailored jackets and coats. So if you haven't checked them out, go check them out. Let me know what you think of those videos as well. But until next time, I will see you in the next video.